Well, good morning. My name is Dr. Stephen Philippi. I'm with the Center for Evidence to Practice at Louisiana State University School of Public Health. Appreciate y'all joining us this morning. The center function is actually to increase the utilization of evidence-based practices throughout Louisiana, particularly for children and their families utilizing Medicaid for services. And one of the things that we've had on our radar for a while is dialectical behavioral therapy, trying to increase the access utilization. And unfortunately or fortunately, COVID gave us an opportunity to expedite our interest in moving DBT forward. So I appreciate y'all joining. I'm going to introduce our speaker in 1 second. Just a couple of quick reminders. There are CEUs, so when we're done with this, you'll be prompted into just a quick prompt at the end of the presentation, and it'll let us know to generate a certificate for you. If you don't get the certificate, Lindsay Simpson is our administrative guru behind all of that, and she can make sure your certificate is generated. We're planning about 2 hours or less, all on Dan, how much or little he wants to go. And then we'll keep y'all informed of any kind of follow-up that goes with the presentation. We've been doing several different EBP presentations for different practices. Not shocking that we got the green light and everybody said, telehealth go. And they were like, telehealth what? And so as people just try to figure out telehealth, we've now tried to bring in the evidence-based specific practices, the detail on those practices so that people are more comfortable using them from a distance. Other than that, I'm going to, I've got everybody on mute except for Dan and I. And then as we go, if you have any questions at all, you certainly can unmute yourself and ask, or if you're more comfortable with chat, feel free to type in the chat, and I'll monitor that while Dan's presenting. And as questions come up, I'll ask, and I'll pause and present them to Dan and see what he wants to do with the question at that time. So thanks again for joining us. Our speaker today is Dan Finnegan, all the way out from the West Coast. So he is literally bright and early. We're at 10 and he's at 8. So appreciate Dan doing this for us. A good friend of mine who's been doing DBT, actually trained me in DBT, is on the board, introduced Dan and I a few weeks ago. And I'm just going to read you his description of Dan. He said that Dan is one of Marcia Linehan's most consistent collaborators, working closely with her for over the last 15 years of her research and clinical work. He has experience in training juvenile justice and other residential settings, and has run the DB program at Cadence for many years. Cadence is a certified DBT program, and Dan is the individually certified DBT therapist via the Linehan Board of Certification. He has several staff therapists that have been running Cadence for via video now for several weeks. So we were excited to get him on board to figure out how he was doing this and share his wisdom about how to do DBT. And Dan, I'm going to turn it all over to you, and I'm going to thank you for doing this for us.
Great, thank you. No, thank you for having me here. It's cool to see everyone, and this is actually very interesting times, both exciting, both scary. They're both separate and true. So I do appreciate you all having me. And of course, you know, the goal of this is to be able to share the learnings and the lessons that we've had, be able to implement the principles through a different medium. And I really want to encourage people, if you have questions, by all means, type them in. Let us know. I don't know if I can see you all at the same time because I have like 3 different things open on my screen. So if you're raising your hand and I don't see you, put it in the chat thing or say something. Okay, just a quick housekeeping thing for disclosures. Yes, I am a clinical director of outpatient DBT. I'm getting compensated for this webinar. I think we've now satisfied those requirements. All right, so what are we doing today? So we're going to really go through of what it looks like and just breaking down practical steps to switching over from in-person to video for DBT across each mode. Really going through some of the lessons we learned, things to consider, and really things to practice. And kind of the really big areas around changes in consent. And actually, well, we'll talk about that in a sec. Risk management precautions, not liability risk management. I'm not that type of presenter, but really risk management for clients. So if you are treating clients, which you likely are, that are engaging in self-harm, suicidal, aggressive behaviors or violent behaviors, part of DBT is constantly having a risk management plan for both clinicians and the clients and families. So we're going to go over to that, of how that changes when you physically don't have them in front of you. We're going to go through each of the modes of DBT and really highlight what were some of the significant changes and how to augment what you might currently be doing to meet the functions over video. All right, so one of the things that we learned on this, and this was, I think everybody, it's interesting to just talk to different people around the country when COVID started hitting people. If you remember back in the news, it was probably somewhere end of February, beginning of March. There was that senior citizen home in Washington that had a bunch of outbreaks. That was a mile from our clinic. That was the Life Center of Kirkland. And that was the first epicenter of outbreaks. And then it went in over quickly to New York. So given that that was a mile away from our clinic, we had clients, I had grandparents and stuff that were in that nursing home. So we started getting concerned. We started having clients getting concerned. We had no idea what this was going on. So we started switching over the very first week of March, making things optional. And then the next week we just switched over completely. And I don't know about Louisiana, you guys might've been right around the same time. So we'll put together our trial and errors and what we did to correct it to help inform this. All right, so some changes, and this is where I always tell people to make sure, know your local laws, consult with a liability attorney or trainer on these things. But things you got to know for telehealth is really be aware where your client is. In the state of Washington, your license is good for who you are treating and where they are located. So I don't know exactly about Louisiana, but for most states, where the client is where the jurisdiction is. So be aware of where your client is located. I ran into this a few times with some of our clients. On quarantine, they went out of state. They went to other family members, stayed at other places. So I had to do some consulting to figure out which states had some out-of-state license guidelines, which things had some collaborative license agreements. So know where your states are. Check to see if there's any local limitations. I have no idea about each state, let alone each county in the state, if you are having to have different requirements given where you're at. So just be able to be aware of that. The other big one is doing informed consent, both with, what's the age of consent for psychotherapy in Louisiana? I meant to look that up today and I forgot. Can anybody give me the finger? Is it 13 or 18?
I think 16 is the age of consent. Somebody can correct me. I haven't practiced in about 2 years, so.
It's good. Well, leave it to, there's always states that it's 13, 18, or some other number.
I believe you're correct. I believe it's 16.
16? Okay, thanks, Dayla. So, so whether you're working with adolescents or their parents, being able to when you switch over teletherapy, you do have to be able to clarify what are the risks and benefits of doing it in this medium. You know, some of the things that you might have to orient people is that you can't guarantee, similar to group, right? When we orient people to group, we orient to how confidentiality is different in group than in individual therapy. I can tell clients I'm not going to share their confidential information, but I can't guarantee that other group members won't. So in teletherapy, we do have to orient people that I'm not going to share your information, but I can't guarantee that your Wi-Fi won't get hacked. Now, I don't try to freak people out because somebody can also theoretically come and stick their ear under my door in my office too. But I do want to go through and identify what are the potential risks and benefits of doing teletherapy. The APA has a nice little checklist and orientation and samples of these if you're interested in looking at those. Some of the things that have been interesting in our state is that we've given the COVID situation in some of our counties, they've actually said to see people in person, we would have to be able to orient them to the risks and benefits, and the risks being potential contamination. So it's a constant weighing of risks and benefits. Our responsibility is making sure that we are orienting clients to those so they're having informed consent, documenting it. So update your consent forms, check with your clients. You know, the biggest thing that we ran into is confidentiality. And it's less on the therapist end, more on the client end, you know, if they live with roommates or other people around them. The other part of risk management more pertain to DBT is really your clients. So I don't know about your all settings, but my setting is we have about 13, 14 therapists. We're all in the office together. We all work very closely together. We see our clients in the office. When there is, you know, a crisis, whether it is an individual session, whether it is in group, there's lots of resources around you. You got your files really handy. You got your things on our computer. You know, it's been so nice to have things computerized that we can quickly pull up all the emergency contact stuff. I can grab a colleague out of the office next to me, get a quick consult, or be able to get help me chase a kid down who's threatening to kill himself and heading towards the parkway. So online, this is all very different. So really being able to make sure every therapist has quick and easy access to client crisis information. And this is really a best practice for DBT clinics, whether it's in person or on video. You really want to have a roster that has your client's name, date of birth, their address, any medications that they're being prescribed, who their individual therapist is, who's the emergency contacts in case you need to get a hold of them. And then a short little blurb of what's the crisis plan. Like if you had to talk to this person in the heat of a crisis and you didn't know them, what are some coaching tips that you're going to be wanting to know? Like what are common prompting events? What are things that help them kind of orient back towards goals, like reasons for living? And what are skills that they have some level of development on that you can pull from? So really having those at your fingertips is really important, whether it's in person or on video, but even more important now because you really are managing crisis, often longer, solo. So having those both for all your individual therapists, but also in skills group. So when you're running skills group, you really want to make sure the co-lead has a roster of all the people in your skills groups. So if I need to call someone, if somebody's in a crisis, if somebody's looking in a crisis in Zoom, they say, I can't tolerate this anymore, I'm just going to kill myself. You see their camera go off. You actually now have ways to be able to contact them or contact somebody who might be able to get a hold of them and coach them. The other big one is LRAMP. If people have been trained in DBT, you might be using the Linehan Risk assessment and management protocol for suicide and self-harm. So it's great to have those printed off. I always have a stack of them on my desk, but I clean my desk, even though you guys can't see it. I clean my desk for the first time in 2 weeks, all prepared for this. Or other risk assessments that you have. Make sure you have just paper copies of those and be filling them out. Like if people are used to filling out things on electronic medical records that are prompting these things, it's a little bit of just going back to old school. If you're new school, then you have to like find someone who's old school that can show you how to fill out paper things. But just have those available. If you have them memorized, great. Make sure you're just having those next to you as you do your sessions. The other big one we found out is making sure you have easy access to your team members. So if you work with a DBT team, it's great to just have them already, if you use Zoom, put them in your address box. So you could be sending quick pings to be able to do a consult with someone. If anyone uses some other systems people might use is like Microsoft Teams, you can set up different ways to do quick video conferencing with each other, share files, organize boards. You really want to have a way that you're able to get quick consultation throughout the week. Not just for suicide crisis, but also for when we think about taking care of the therapist, increasing the things that have gone down while you're working from home. And also often what has gone down is that social reinforcement. And social reinforcement reduction often leads to people feeling depressed, therapists as well. So we want to make sure we're actually doing things to reduce vulnerability for therapists. And that's really putting yourself in contact with the people you're used to getting social reinforcement from. The other big one to just manage risk, the worst case scenario is you're in the middle of a crisis. There's a suicide crisis in front of you and the internet goes down or your platform freezes. And then you and the client are just staring at each other doing this, moving your head while both people are pretty much freaking out. So before you get in a crisis, always have a backup plan with each client in each group in case someone's internet goes down. How can they still jump right back into the session? So for individual sessions, I have a standing policy with my clients. The second time we freeze for more than 30 seconds, we're just going to call each other. In group, if your internet goes down or you can't hear or it sounds like somebody's underwater talking because it's so garbled, people are just going to mute their camera or mute their Zoom call and call the group co-lead. So just have a plan so technology doesn't become therapy destroying or interfering, and get people to practice it. All right. So jumping in. So those are the things ahead of time clinic-wise to think about. You know, if anybody had questions about pre-things or clinic-wide things, this is a good time for those. And now we're going to jump into each mode. All right. So jumping into the modes, we're going to jump into each mode of this and really kind of talk about some of the issues and some of the solutions for each of these. So looking at individual therapy is really looking at things like prior to the first session for the therapist. You know, before you start doing this, really kind of be looking to set up your environment. Imagine everybody is working from home or you're going to the office or some setting that you're doing sessions now that is different. So really make sure you are setting up your environment that actually looks like a treatment setting. You think of just context, actually an environment polls for established behaviors. You have worked really hard with your clients to establish therapy-like behavior. So make sure you use your background and what you have, what the client can see, that helps kind of cue up that context to pull up some of those behaviors. If you had a whole bunch of therapy interfering behavior before, well, maybe you might want to switch it up and try some new things out. But you really want to make sure you have your lighting right, test out your audio, try this several times with colleagues, experiment with ways to be able to do active teaching. So you could go old school. One thing I have old school is I do have a giant erase board in my office here. You can set that up behind you if you want to actually write on it. It is helpful to have a light somewhat close to your whiteboard, but be careful about the sheen. You could also do the share your screen and do a whiteboard. If people experimented with that, that's a pretty good way to do it. If you have an iPad with a stylus, you can, if you use Zoom, you can share your screen and then mirror your iPad to your screen. And so your iPad can become a whiteboard. You could try out just using, we had one therapist, this was our first week trials of everything. Everybody was trying out their styles on this. One therapist, just a clipboard and white paper and a Sharpie and just putting it up there. Their writing was good enough, you can put it in. Depending on your video camera, it will look backwards to you. So get a trusted colleague and have them give you some honest feedback, like can they actually read your writing? Is it mirrored backwards or not? And just find out a way, if you are somebody who writes a lot or uses a whiteboard, you really want to find a way that you can have that, especially when you're doing chains, because we really want to be able to have both the therapist and the client be looking at all that data to be able to develop a clinical hypothesis from it. So finding ways to do that. If you're a good typer, you can just pull up a Word document, and on Zoom, you can share specific documents and share your screen and just be typing on a Word document. I type very slowly and I make a million typing errors. My clients would get tremendously distracted if I did that, but find a way that you can do this. Because you do want to try make this medium active. Asking clients and really looking to think about what are the barriers clients are going to have. You know, a lot of clients are concerned about who else is in the room, you know, who else might be hearing this, depending on who you're treating. Some of my adolescents, they are so used to putting their face on a camera and broadcasting that video across the world, they could care, you know, some of them can care less. Like I sit there and I try to orient them, they're like, we don't care. Other clients, they do care. So you really want to check in to say, what are some barriers that clients have about the setting? I also got to recognize, you know, like notice what's behind you. I think my fish are safe. I don't know if a deer head would probably lose 80% of my clients in Seattle. I don't know about Louisiana. But the big one was getting people to just jump in and do. That teams could talk for months to figure out what exactly to do. We had people debating about which size whiteboard was the best. It's like, just jump in and do it. Get the data from the clients. Model actually jumping in and problem solving. Model fallibility, as well as how to be able to respond when your first solution isn't the best solution, and start generating newer solutions and trying new things. Because ultimately, this is what we want clients to do. The other big thing prior to doing this was really addressing the therapist barriers. So therapists, depending on, I don't know what the variable what was for this. I think it was probably fear might have been one of them. And I think another one might be social interpersonal sensitivity to others. I'll get into that in a sec. But this was really problem solving the barriers. Like, biggest barrier up there was fear. People had lots of fear about doing teletherapy, and you all might. So I don't want to poo-poo it, but actually, you know, it's valid, right? Especially when we're talking about clients that are doing high-risk behavior. But the thing I kept hearing the most was like, well, what if somebody's suicidal? you know, and it's like, you can't treat a suicidal client online. And I kept wondering, it's like, well, is that really true? And asking people, well, what if somebody was in front of you and was suicidal and said they're going to kill themselves and just left your office? Like, what are you going to do then? Are you going to tackle them or something? You know, so what's the difference? But it was, I think at some level, there's a sense of control when someone's in front of you. And having a sense of control is going to reduce your fear. When the reality, we have very limited control to no control over ourselves or our clients. We can't control the future. I can't control a suicidal client. I can treat a suicidal client, but once I try to control one, it just goes off the rails. So really looking at and addressing fear, and usually the fears around suicide, the fears around what if somebody starts cutting, what if somebody tries to kill themselves in front of me and I can't intervene? And really getting yourself to practice coping ahead with that. Usually that fear will get us, flood us up. We won't even imagine it. We'll say, I just can't do it. And we don't think about it anymore. So this might be a really good team exercise if people are feeling fearful on team, to really walk through and do a cope ahead. If that happened, how would I actually cope with it? And then really vividly picture it occurring and picturing yourself responding to it. And then with the team, figure out, what else do I need to cope ahead with? How else would I solve this? And really being able to regulate the fear that might get in the way of doing this. The other one with interpersonal sensitivity, I believe, was there's another one that just really kept popping up. You couldn't do this because you can't establish a relationship. Couldn't do this because they couldn't get a relationship. And I kept trying to discuss and find that out. It's like, once they show up, and usually once they're kind of there in the second session, we do have a relationship. The relationship is, I'm here to help you and you're here to practice new things. And some of this was, I think, when looking at this, and this is where I like, one of the beauties of DBT is it really allows the therapist and the team to look at therapist behavior and say, how do we end up sometimes getting in the way of the treatment? And what do we need to do to regulate ourselves in order to better deliver the treatment? Some of this on our team, we identified that there was, some of the people were very sensitive, not this isn't in a pejorative term, but just they had higher sensitivity to interpersonal interactions, in the sense that they actually found people sitting in front of someone was very reinforcing. You know, when somebody's in front of you and they smile, that actually is a strong reinforcer for us. It'll elicit a smile, will change our emotional experiences. So some people are going to have a sensitivity between somebody in front of them versus a video in front of them. And it feels different to them. So this is really looking at, when we get to that global construct, we don't have a relationship. It's really breaking that down to specifics. What exactly is that? What exactly is that on my end? Because when we do that, then we can start identifying what are the reductions that I experience that then actually that leads me to evaluate this process differently. Because then now I can problem solve it, do things to up that interaction I have that is reinforcing, that then makes me label this as a good relationship. Or how do I tolerate this, that this is different, when the goal is actually getting the client to do and recognizing how I feel about this in the moment might not be the primary goal. So it's a really good thing to re-examining yourselves and your team to see, where does these things show up. Sometimes some of the problems is true when we think about when clients want to feel more connected and have a hard time trusting a therapist if they haven't seen a therapist. So it's really being able to get specific and look at these and then be able to assess and problem solve these in sessions. Tech problems is another big one. Just not knowing how to do these things. At one point, I felt like I knew technology. And then at some point, I don't know when this happened. It could have been 2005. It could have been 2015. Man, it just lapped me. And so this is where I'm really grateful for people around me in our clinic who can actually show me how to do these things. It's like trying to figure out a whiteboard. For the life of me, I couldn't figure out a whiteboard. You can go figure it. Given I have a whiteboard, a physical whiteboard in my office, and I used clipboards to start this off. I had to get some of our folks around me to show us how to do it on the computer and how to link up my iPad. So if tech problems is a skills deficit or an agency deficit, you don't necessarily have access or can't use certain tech things, then use the team to really be able to help solve these things. Like, I always think of every problem I'm running into that gets in the way of me delivering this treatment, whether it's technology or my emotions, is absolutely topics for consultation team. Thank God I got a group of people smarter than me who are committed to help me out on these things. We also want to make sure when you think of these assessments and problems, do a lot of rehearsal, practice with each other, and practice with your team. For the clients, we got to prep them for doing this as well. So one of the things we're often doing in the first few minutes of session is getting that diary card. And I'm very used to like people just handing me a diary card. I mean, some of my clients, the first week they did it, they started just holding up things like this to me. And I'm like, that is just making me seasick. That does not work. But just getting them to take a picture and text it to me, that works. Some kids figure out how to like make their own little electronic diary card and send it to me via email. Fantastic. I can open an email. So making sure you get the diary card before session. Don't let the diary card drift off to the ether and say, we'll do this when we come back. And actually, I think of any of this parts of treatment, you know, when we all have gone down on a lockdown or stay at home, there's certain parts, it's a surreal thing, right? We really haven't been through this. And there's a lot of things in our daily routines that we normally did, like get up, drive in, go to work, sit in traffic, get frustrated about that, daydream about working from home, go back in traffic, that were just daily parts of our routine that aren't there anymore. And we just stopped doing regular parts of our routine. Like I know for sure it wasn't up until a few weeks ago that I'm thinking I should probably do more than 500 steps in a day. I'm not even leaving my house. So the same thing is going to show up when you switch over to video therapy, that it's going to feel a little bit like it is a different medium. It's going to feel like vacation, right? So there's going to be certain things that maybe would be easy to drop. And you really got to be on guard for that to consciously not drop crucial parts of the treatment and have things kind of just start sliding down. And diary cards are those things, homework review, doing exposures, getting people to actively do things in session are often those things that can kind of slide down. And so really making sure you're targeting that and being aware of that, and then problem solving and troubleshooting that ahead of time. So the diary card wasn't too hard to keep going. It just took a lot of people to a lot of clarity. It's the same, we're going to be doing the same things. One of the things that actually is I've actually increased my diary card compliance because I have yet to have somebody tell me I filled it out, but I forgot it when I came to session. I imagine everybody has heard that in their lifetime. So yes, I filled it out. Well, good, let's look for it. Being able to post it and put it somewhere in their room or somewhere nearby at the end of session. So we're really making sure that we have the environment conducive to getting this diary card filled out and brought in the next week.
Hey, Dan.
Yep.
On that note, there's a comment in the chat box about diary cards, just talking about email, not being totally secure, and having them sent via email might also present some at least minimal risk.
Sure. Yeah. You know, you could always have them text it, send a picture. or include in your initial client agreements, if you have them signing off or recognizing the risks and benefits of using email or text messaging. But some agencies don't let people use email like this. So then, yeah, you might want to use an app or tell clients to don't put their name on it, or decrease the risk there.
Excellent point. Thank you.
So yes, some of the ways that for adolescents that we've been that people did early and often are doing is sending them a text message at the very beginning of the day or the night before. So I usually set up, at the end of my day, look at my schedule the next day and send a text to my clients, just reminding them of our appointment tomorrow. Telling them, don't forget your homework and your diary card and these things, especially for my teens that it just feels like every day is Saturday. And the days just blend together. A lot of them, it's like, there is no natural occurrence that today is Wednesday or whatever. So sending them reminders. This might be something you were doing in person as well, but it is one of those things that helps increase compliance. Maybe you all had a reminder that there's a webinar today, and maybe that increased compliance of logging in on a webinar. If people don't have their diary cards done, perfect. Well, let's make sure we have a backup. So this is where I will just share my screen with their diary card and walk through it, get the data from them. If they can't remember, we might do something to help facilitate their memory, get the highlights and the things that we need, and then move on. I also tell clients, make sure that they actually have the stuff they need. Like, even if it's skills group, of course, have your skills manual, but even if it's not skills group, you're coming up in individual sessions, have your skills manual, because I want to check in around what you're practicing. I might also want to get you to look at some of the pages and some of the skills in there as part of our solution analysis of our session. So I want to make sure clients are coming to session prepared. Getting them to make a little notebook, getting them to do whatever, so that they have all their therapy material in one area, just like they're coming into the clinic. They got their exposure hierarchy if we're doing exposure. They have all sorts of stuff that they're set up for. If I'm doing trauma work or PTSD, PE with clients in DBT sessions, we're really practicing and coming up with ways to record that session. Do people use audio recording or to get clients to record their DBT sessions as well at all? It used to be a standard thing in some of the studies at the UW was clients would have cassette tapes. And we got a bunch of recorders at Value Village, and people would record on cassette tapes their sessions, and their homework each week was to listen to their session. Often, given that clients were dysregulated, their recall of session was low. So if you are recording sessions for clients to help generalize the stuff they're learning in session, make sure you have ways they can do that. I've really told clients I don't want them recording things onto clouds. There's always risks of those things, but usually most of my clients just put their phone and record the session on their phone. That's their risk, they're initiating that. Or at least recording the last 10 minutes of our session, or they're really highlighting what were the main points of this session. What is the things that they are committing to practice between sessions? And then what are the things that they're going to troubleshoot that might come up of getting in the way of that, so that they're able to listen and get the bullet points throughout the week. For our clients, especially this time, who are more lonely, might be having less contact. So a lot of our DBT clients were lonely before, and some of them are definitely feeling more lonely now. That, for some individual, sessions in group is the high watermark of social contact and care throughout the week. So having recordings that they are listening and hearing their therapist's voice is often, for a lot of our clients, very comforting. And it puts them back into contact with Wise Mind and treatment goals. So troubleshoot that, be able to, or put that in play and find out ways to get that online with clients. During sessions, boy, there's all sorts of things that can show up during sessions, but actually I think of this as a really unique, interesting opportunity. For years we get clients that come into our office, and I often are sitting there going, man, I'm just very curious of what happens to the other 167 hours in the week. It is just like, I get kids and adults, and I'm just like, now what exactly happened? Now where is this? You hear bits and parts of stories. Like, actually seeing clients in their environment has been very helpful for both assessment, problem solving, and generalization. So really thinking of this is, yes, the circumstances of why we are going to teletherapy or video therapy is very difficult. And the fact that I'm actually able to get assessment and instruction in the context that you actually need to develop new behavior patterns. And it's probably the most relevant context. For most of our clients, at home is the most relevant context for new behavior in order to be able to help them reach their life worth living goals. I always tell my clients, the goal, their life is not my therapy office, unless their goal is to become my successor, which I really encourage anybody to do at some point, because I want to retire, or they want to be a therapist. Their life goals are outside of this office. And so we need to be actively practicing things outside of here. So this now puts us in the place they need new skills. So really getting them to embrace this, and for us to embrace this. When we are doing chains, it's really helpful to help facilitate memory of the very specific details, both internal and external, when you actually go back to the place this started out from. So doing this helps us be able to, if privacy permits and the client is willing, is being able to go right back to, where did the prompting event start? So let's go right back to the dining room, walk it over there. And then what were the things that unfolded? How did you end up in the kitchen? And so it allows you to really be able to get a more robust chain by getting people to walk back through there. It also gets them, now once we get that chain, to do solution analysis, to get them to go back to those areas with you and start practicing new skills in those areas. You can now actually scan the environment with them to say, how would we structure this environment to actually increase the likelihood that you're going to do more skillful means in the future? This helps do a little troubleshooting too. This has been very helpful for me to get an idea. Now I know why people were reluctant to go down and get ice from the fridge, because downstairs was very open, and right next to the freezer, where the fridge was, where the main nemesis that they always end up in conflict hangs out watching TV. Now I go, oh, now I know why you don't go get ice. You have to go through the whole family to get that ice. So getting an idea how we're going to structure that differently. The solution for that kid was actually, they got about 3 or 4 of those gel ice pads, and they had, everybody these days has those water canteens in Seattle. If you don't have a water canteen in Seattle, I think you get asked to move. And so they just took those gel ice things and stuck them in those water canteens, and then they had them in the room. And so once a day, that was their chore. Come home, put your gel pack in your canteen, and that thing kept freezing cold for the next 12 hours. So they didn't have to go downstairs. So when they did get in a fight with their sister, which was about as often as a day ends in Y, they had access to ice and didn't have to go through the firing line to go get it. So that was actually really helpful to actually see. It's like, oh, that's what the house looks like. You can also, with consent and orientation, is actually get people to practice. So get the client to practice that dear man with their spouse or with their partner. Get them to be able to help bring in their parents to do problem solving. If you use Zoom, it's really nice to have the waiting room and orient parents or partners or other family members that we'd love to have them in for the last 15 minutes a session. And then you see them show up on the waiting room. You don't have to let them in right then, but as you all know, you all sat in the waiting room. But you're able to then bring them in for part of that session and really do practice. Getting the client to be able to interact more skillfully with their environment, ask for what they need in the environment, and get the people in the environment to rehearse and practice with them. The other big one is exposures. If you've done a lot of exposures, you are used to being out of the office. If you only do exposures in the office, then what your client's anxiety believes is that there's this magical bubble around your office that makes their feared outcomes not happen. But as soon as they leave the magical bubble, game on. Anxiety, OCD, and everything else will take over my life. So it is great to be able to get good at video sessions, to be able to get people to do exposure tasks at home and around their environment. And it's a nice little thing in the sense that I'm wondering, we're trying to collect some data on this, if we might hit a little more of a habituation and generalization effect sooner than when we would go to their home, because there is, when therapists are standing next to you, it's a safety behavior. Like, I am a professional therapist. Who else would you want next to you if you're encountering something scary? So there's always that part, clients have that belief, if it was really dangerous, he wouldn't make me do it. If it was dangerous, he's here to save me, which are safety behaviors that might get in the way of creating new learning. So being a few steps removed by video, it could jump up the SUDS, but it actually can increase the new learning as an effect. So take advantage of those, look at those. The other big one during sessions and switching overs, okay, you could imagine everybody, whether it's clients, family members, neighbors, we can spend all day talking about the way the world is right now, because it's very unique, right? We're not short of stories on this. Clients could be really distressed on it, which we got to acknowledge, we got to be able to help them cope with. But we also got to get them to be able to see this right here in front of their face and be able to set this to the side without demanding it, shoving it down, suppressing it, in order to get them focused further down the road of the life they want to be building, not just the crisis the world's in. Yes, the world's in crisis, and how do you want to be when this is over? And being able to really keep with the treatment plan. Some of these things you're going to see shift. Like for some if people work with adolescents, it'd be interesting to hear what you all experience. Some of your adolescents, they're doing fine right now. They have so many stressors that have gone down. They aren't getting bullied. They're not feeling overwhelmed at school. They're not incredibly anxious around all the people around them. They're like, this is kind of nice. This is like kind of good. I don't feel suicidal anymore. There's other people who this is a huge reduction of social reinforcers. They're feeling very anxious and depressed. Some of my adults, this is overwhelming. They are hitting significant financial strains. They're worried about jobs. They're worried about kids. They are around their kids constantly. And this has gone up. So really recognizing for your clients, who has this created more problems and who has this created less problems? And the clients that this all of a sudden they're saying everything's good are the ones I'm really being able to target, saying that doesn't mean we've solved suicide. Like if suicide and self-harm used to show up a lot in February and March, and in April and May, it hasn't showed up. And when I really assess it, what's different? The environment's different. I'm not as stressed out. I'm not as anxious. I'm not dealing with these problems that I used to get so overwhelmed with. Treatment's not over because those problems are coming back. This is kind of that phenomenon when people go into the hospital and they feel like, oh, the hospital really worked. I'm not knocking hospitals. I'm just recognizing that phenomenon, that if I'm really overwhelmed in my life, and then all of a sudden I step out of my life and the stressor's gone down, that risk of going back and hitting all my stressors. That's why out of the hospital, those first week out of the hospital is a high risk suicide time. Is really recognizing this is the setup for a lot of our clients, that they're going to come back into contact with all those context and cues that make them feel overwhelmed. So fantastic self-harm isn't occurring now. Fantastic, you're not having intense suicidal planning and ideation. So what's actually, don't take a break. So my metaphor on this is like, yes, there's that massive forest fire that you just got out of the flames and you got about 50 to 100 yards to 300 yards in front of the flames, that it doesn't feel so hot. This is not the time to sit on a stump and take a break and breather because you finally caught your breath. You got to get moving. Like you got to get out of the path of the fire. So we got to get moving and really look to say, how do we actually try to create stressors or really maintain the urgency to developing new skills and behaviors and coping ahead of how we're going to plan to implement these when these things start coming back in. So other things around individual therapy. There hasn't been too much different than that. You know, some people have asked like how to introduce, like if you use video things or use video clips or you do other things with clients in session, you know, doing those things through video sessions is about the same thing. You can share your screen and show them lots of stuff. And experiment out with those things. Some of what I've had to do is just load them up and have them ready for session. If you take clients, if clients need de-escalation and you often go for a walk with them to help regulate them after session, you can do the same sort of things in session, depending where you're at. You know, if it's easy and accessible for you to take a walk, then go for it. You can take a walk for them afterwards and have your same ending rituals or wind down things that you might have done before. Skills group, where 99% of the problems show up. Most questions show up as like, how the heck are we going to do a skills group on Zoom? Well, yeah, that is very different. It's a lot easier when you all come together and you're in the same room with me versus video. So prior to the group for therapist is really kind of stepping back and saying, for your skills group, what's the active ingredients that you bring, you and your co-leads, that makes your group go well? Like, what are those top 3 to 4 things you do that creates a good learning environment, that creates sticky moments that new learning attaches to? Practices, examples, role plays that you do that are helpful, and really looking to say, what are those? And then how can I get that to come alive in a video? Like, one of the things I do the most in skills group is I don't sit down. I cannot teach sitting down. Although I'm sitting down here, Zoom has literally put a box around me. I tend to be very active, moving, and getting people practicing a lot in skills group. And so I had to really come up with ways how to get people to practice while I'm not walking around drawing their attention. So I did a lot of work with adolescents, and I did a lot of work with adolescents that were incarcerated, which you had to be a constant cue for their attention, but not too chaotic that it got out of control and they didn't learn. So one of my practices, I had to recognize the challenge I was going to have. How am I going to stay engaging sitting down? So I had to get my team to help me, like literally tell me when I'm off the camera, actually reinforce me for sitting in a chair, but then looking to say, how do we actually evaluate these things? And the co-lead looking for these things. How are these things showing up in this group? Are things that were productive in person showing up now? And then what are targets for the lead and co-lead to do to get those things to occur? Getting you and your co-lead to do a lot of practice with the technology. Like this is the crucial. I gotta get my hands higher now because I talk with my hands, but darn camera doesn't pick them up down here. So get you guys to practice, because you don't want 15 people or 10 people in your group to be all sitting there as your technology fits out or you're trying to figure it out. So practice on your team, practice with each other. So one of the things that we've really got to do is think about the roles. You know, it's easier to generalize the leader role from in-person to video, you know, teach skills. The co-lead role was harder to generalize because the co-lead is constantly evaluating and scanning the clients to increase cohesion, to be able to validate and hold up the validation accepted side to me pushing on change as a leader, to recognizing who is getting wobbly, that is shorthand for who's actually looking like they're starting to struggle in group, who is starting to have emotional arousal, who is looking like they're lost, and then moving in, coaching, validating, dragging out new skills, and being able to help actually get back in line to learning. So it took a lot of ways to figure out how to be able to coach clients without totally interrupting the group or make all coaching public. So I think we'll hit that here in a second. Let me make sure we do hit that. Oh, good, we will. All right. So you want to get people to practice these things. This is where if you have a good at the chat function, I got one co-lead in our team who's awesome. She is, I swear, she types so fast. She's very accurate. She's very validating. She could sit there on the chat thing and send out like 15 messages every 3 minutes to different clients. One of our therapists is Australian and writes, I don't know if she writes in Australian. Sometimes it looks Australian. So the co-lead will sometimes write down, she's a brilliant, wonderful leader, but sometimes people are like looking, like if they don't get it, the co-lead will quickly then type out what she said. I give lots of bear stories, which shockingly are not the most relevant stories that all teens and adults connect to. So sometimes my co-lead will type out, replace bear with bully, or replace bear with boss, just to be able to quickly jump in without distracting. You want to practice like how to deal with a crisis in group. Like if you have conflict, therapy destroying conflicts. We think of like, remember the hierarchy of group. Stop therapy destroying behavior, teach and acquire new skills, deal with therapy interfering behavior below that. So you think of like, if there's therapy destroying behavior that shows up, somebody starts threatening suicide, somebody starts telling someone else they should kill themselves, somebody starts cutting in the middle of the group, somebody starts fighting, like, and throwing out the worst moments to each other over Zoom, how to deal with that crisis. So how to practice both people, make sure your lead and co-lead both have controls over the meeting, make them a co-host. Practice turning off people's videos. Practice muting people. Practice removing somebody from a session. If you can mute them and shut off their video, you've effectively removed them from a session. Because the worst case scenario, something shows up in the middle of the group and everyone's just staring at it, and then now client on a vengeant rage is running the group. So you want to just practice doing that. And then this is where that sheet where all the clients' phone numbers and contact information is handy, because you want to turn off the camera, mute their mic, co-leads on the phone, calling and coaching that client and trying to get them back into group. Y'all want to come up with a way of how you're going to be able to reinforce covertly so you don't distract people. In skills group in person, there is a million ways you can non-verbally socially reinforce someone. Maybe not a million, plus or minus 3. But that isn't the same ability on video, right? Like me giving a thumbs up, I can't, like, people don't know if I'm giving a thumbs up to Samantha or to Betty. But in group, I can totally be giving a thumbs up or a nod or nice job and not distract from the conversation. And it's very clear who's getting that thumbs up. So you got to come up with ways of how you're going to covertly reinforce people as well as overtly reinforce people. So one of the things you might really want to be thinking of is you really got to clarify clearly who and what is the behavior I'm reinforcing, and then how I'm reinforcing it. Now, social reinforcers still apply. Smiles and way to goes still work there. Or having other ways to do this. One of my co-leads made paper plates with thumbs up signs. I don't know, all those emoji things that I don't get. She gets on popsicle sticks because I talk a lot. So she could sit there and wait an hour before she can go, hey, remember that, Cynthia, about 28 minutes ago when you did that thing when Dan was stopped talking last? Good job. So what she's able to do is just flash up, good job, thumbs up to people. She did jokingly, but I thought it was wonderful. Had one of like a yawning emoji and when I was talking a bunch and put that up. I thought that was fantastic. So having ways you can get that reinforcement to show up in sessions. The chat function is another great way for that. Validation is the other big thing, is that you really need to explicitly verbally validate people. Now that saying that out loud sounds like, no kidding, Dan, that's right, you should really do that. But you recognize of watching a lot of groups, there's a lot of nonverbals and functional validation that occurs. And that you have less of that on video. So you really want to, be consciously thinking of overtly reinforcing. So if you do multifamily skills group, this is actually something that's really helpful, because what you're really doing is doing a lot of modeling at the level that you're getting people that they're acquiring new skills at. So a family that has either low rates of validation or might be invalidating, they actually don't do a lot of nonverbal validation or functional validation. So they're learning and acquiring often the verbal explicit validation. So you're actually modeling at their level that they're learning at. So that's actually been something I'm thinking that we really need to focus on doing more when we go back in person. The other good thing to practice out is breakout rooms, if you want to use them. So Zoom allows you on your settings to do breakout rooms. I don't know about some of the other platforms. You might want to check on that. But you can set up a lead and a co-lead, and then clients assigned to each breakout room, and you can send people to breakout rooms. This is helpful when you have the group that doesn't talk, is to make the group smaller, spend part of your time of homework review, getting people to practice and go over homework together, maybe in a group of 3 or 4, and then come back in a larger group. So practice doing breakout rooms. Breakout rooms are also helpful for individual sessions if you have people coming in from different areas. So if you have the pro version of Zoom, you can have lots of people on. If you don't have the pro version of Zoom, I don't know if you can make a breakout room there or not. But breakout rooms did help people, like bringing in multiple different peoples in a family. In our clinic, in our skills room, we have lots of extra binders because people show up and they don't have their material. So make sure you have material. So I always have, if you have your skills binder, Linehan's handouts and worksheets, I think somewhere at the very beginning of that binder, it gives you the website that you can download the PDFs that if you agree for permission to use with clients, that then you have that on your desktop, you can share it. And so one of the things I'll often do is practice doing that and get students. Let me pull up mine. I'm going to stop sharing this and share something else. Look at that, I failed my first principle. I don't know if it's my first principle. Let me try this one. So you can always have your handouts up there and have your screen so you can still see people's, because hopefully everyone sees the pros and cons worksheet or handout. Good, I'm glad there's nods. There's not like vacation photos. And when you are on this, you can also annotate or write on it. So if I wanted to use purple for LSU, and I was teaching people around pros and cons, and I was really telling people once we got our pros and cons that they have to make sure that they get all these boxes. So when we go through our pros and cons, we got to get you to over memorize the cons of acting on that crisis urge and the pros of resisting your crisis urge. And the longer the delay of you being able to pull up your pros and cons from your memory, the higher the risk of relapse. So having your worksheets handy so you can be able to teach from them if you need, or if people need to look at them. Being able to practice using the highlighter or the stylus function to write on them if you need. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing those and pull up my other ones. Go back to our slides. Being able to, those worksheets, they come in a PDF that has a couple hundred worksheets in them. Practicing, so how to save individual worksheets. So if you're going to print a range, for most printers, there's an option on the bottom that you can save as a PDF. So you can save a page or two and then send that to the client. So the client who says, oh, I'm in my grandma's house or I'm at work, I don't have my skills book, you can quickly send them that information so they have that. For clients before group is that we really want to make sure, and we did a little handout for them of what's going to make a good Skype call, or what's going to Skype call. Oh my God, that's like 2003. What's going to make a good Zoom call? And that we wanted to make sure for group people can see each other. So telling them about the lighting, like don't sit in front of a window. Unless you live in Seattle, you can sit in front of a window because the sun doesn't shine and nothing happens. But for other parts of the state, don't sit in front of a window. You look like you're talking to someone in the witness relocation program. That we also want to make sure we can limit the contact to people who aren't in group. So if we're bringing, in our multifamily skills group, 5 families together, in my adult groups, 10 to 12 adults to group, I'm introducing 10 to 12 households. And so I really want to make sure that clients are set up in a way that we can ensure confidentiality and minimize disruption from other people in the house. Now, there's going to be times I've had clients that have young children and they are in charge of those young children, and that's fine. Actually, sometimes I think it makes group more accessible for them, that they can have their young children to the side and be participating in group. We often just have the kids wave hi so people know them if they want, but it allows them to be in group. We know who's in the background, and it isn't a disruption in group. It's when I've had clients who are sitting there and I can see like 5 people walking in and out of the background. It's like, okay, we need you to move. It actually inhibits people from talking and practicing. Background noise is the biggest tech problem in the world for group. Somebody inevitably has an echo, and it's really hard to teach for people to talk when there's a big echo going through all these different computers. So get people to practice putting headphones on if they need it, mute people if they need it. I have my co-lead. My co-lead is a co-lead to keep me on track, reinforce people, validate people, manage crisis, and is also a sound engineer. So if they have problems hearing people, they are constantly checking, muting mics, and doing other things. Individual therapists really have to orient clients and get them committed about doing video sessions for group. If there's resistance, your individual therapist is really assessing that. If there's barriers, individual therapist is being able to assess and problem solve this. Biggest barrier I've seen for groups on video is socially anxious clients don't want to have their video on. And so getting them to start practicing and doing exposures of having their video on and tolerating the discomfort, checking out the outcomes when they do that exposure. Sometimes, this is interesting, I've had a lot of people wanting to wait out COVID. Makes reasonable sense. I kind of want to wait it out too. But saying like, maybe we'll come back to group when we're back live. That made sense a couple months ago, but now in Seattle, that doesn't make much sense. This is what's going to happen. And so really being able to validate the concern, assess why is it a concern, and then troubleshoot and then problem solve based on it. For some, it's like it's hard for them to learn on video. And so really doing problem solving of how do we augment teaching and learning for this medium. You know, others was like, I just like it to be in person. It's like, I would like that too. You know, exactly. It's sad and it's disappointing that we've had this interruption in our life. And I still have these problems that need new skills in order to solve. So how do I actually recommit and throw myself in, even when this isn't the preferred, even if it is uncomfortable? And then really making sure individual therapists, once groups are going, to be checking in, finding out who is struggling. You know, what do you need to do with this client to make sure they acquire the skills they're going to group for? Now, some of this responsibility falls on the skills group leaders, kind of be assessing through role plays, from practice, from clients' homework. Do they understand the skills? But a major part of this is individual therapist. Remember, individual therapist on that target hierarchy, that first sets of targets, those stage 1 targets are increasing behavioral skills. So you really want to be assessing, what do clients understand? What are they what's your plan to strengthen and generalize critical skills and to address skills deficits? And if video is not the preferred medium, it isn't how they learn, how to augment it. And of course, skills group brings up lots of problems. Some of these problems are new ones, some of them are old ones. So one of the problems, I don't know if anyone has this problem, but the most painful group I have is the group that nobody wants to talk. It's the more anxious group, the quiet group. You see the tops of a lot of heads. They'll talk to you if you call on them. When it's their time to go over the homework, they'll talk, but it's very quiet. And so really trying to manufacture discussion. I mean, this is like you feel like the party catalyst. I feel like the wedding DJ or somebody who's walking around like, oh, well, Stephen, you like fishing. Well, did you know that Cynthia likes fishing as well? You guys should talk about this. It is this constant trying to get people to mingle and talk, where when they are all in the same room together, you're kind of like you're on a lifeboat together. You eventually start talking to each other, but when you are in your room video calling in, So really trying to manufacture discussion, connect to each other's goals, get people to comment on skills. So like when I'm doing homework review, if we did coping ahead for somebody in a family situation, saying something, let's say we're having a family barbecue. Well, that ain't happening anytime soon, but let's say we're doing that anyway. And somebody in the family is going to say something that's going to make you feel so hurt. They're going to say this. Aunt Betty is going to say X, Y, Z, and you're going to feel so hurt, and you're going to want to cry and leave the barbecue. So how are we going to do a cope ahead for Aunt Betty saying this to regulate that sadness and that shame you feel? And then who else did a cope ahead on shame? And pulling other people into this homework. Great. All right. So Angela, how did you do your cope ahead? Perfect. All right, Jill, what was similar to what Angela said for yours? What would you add for your cope ahead on that? And start getting people to interact and connect over skills they're practicing and situations they're practicing on. Whoever runs into this at the workplace, raise your hand. Oh, good. Aiden has it and Gerald has it. Fantastic. All right, Aiden, how else would you do this cope ahead that Angela just put it? What would be different at work? And start getting people to practice off each other's homework. Increase the interaction. Try to get between panel discussion, not every set of information come from them to you, back to them. Sometimes I actually get people to just point in different directions. In whatever direction they point at, that's the next person I call on for homework. The fun fact is everybody's screen is different. So on Zoom, if Jill is on the bottom of my screen, she might not be on the bottom of your screen. So it's actually quite fun to get people to point in a direction. I just call on whoever I feel like. I'm just getting them to interact with each other. Give clients tasks. And actually get them to report out now. Like when we're actually either setting up the next skill, what we're going to teach next week, I might give people a task. I might give people a specific task for homework and pair them up with someone else and get them to actually report out, like actually increase the discussion. Get the co-lead to start prompting others. Think, hey, you're coming up next. You're going to do homework next. Or what's your thoughts? This would be a good idea. You should add in the things you know about this. Like getting them to prompt. For some of those people that freeze when they get called on, this is a good way to actually communicate you're coming up prepared so that actually they get up and start talking more. Because when you get an anxious group together and one person freezes, then they all start freezing. So the more I can get them to talk and be a little more loose, it starts actually generating more conversation. Get people to interact for panels. All right, I haven't done this for an adult group, but I do more adolescent groups these days. Whenever I see these Zoom calls, I think of two things. Everyone probably thinks of the Brady Bunch. I also think of Hollywood Squares. And if people remember Hollywood Squares, yep, oh good, yes, it was really bad TV, like on at 10 in the morning. So like when you're sick or in summer, you watch Hollywood Squares. And I think it was Rip Taylor was always on it. I don't know if Rip Taylor did anything other than be on Hollywood Squares. So I always have him on my game board. You get Rip Taylor and he's a free square. So try to get people, like give them a little grid and play Hollywood Squares bingo. How do you play Hollywood Squares bingo? If you can get someone else to talk about the skill they talked about this week, you get a point. Like you get an extra. Now you can mix and match. You can mash up every game show in the world, but just get them to start tracking. Try to get them to do a bingo. I got all that row to do a validation. I heard a validation come out of each person of that row. If they didn't say a validation, then I'd actually have to go, hey, Tina, I'm really glad you showed up today. That's a reinforcement. I imagine, given that was Memorial Day, there was a lot on your plate today. So I'm really glad you showed up. It might have been hard to be here. Oh, there was a validation. Great. I get a check off on Tina. And so getting people to start interacting. My older teens, at first are too cool for this, but then they get fiercely competitive and will go all day on this. But it gets them to start interacting more. And it gives me a cue that I can get them to interact with each other around skills. Some people do better in small groups. Do the breakout room. Get them interacting. I always think of shaping as well. I want to increase interaction, increase rates of people talking in group, increasing people participating, and then start to shape that into being able to do that into a larger group. So I might really have to start small, build it up, and then shape towards doing this all together. And for a lot of my adolescents, this is hugely important because this actually generalizes to school. For my adults, this is the same thing around that helps them build relationships and friends to reduce their loneliness. Oh, we've all hit this one. Tired of stupid screens, stupid Zoom calls. They're boring. I don't know about Louisiana, but up in Seattle, everyone's doing like school on Zoom. Everybody's on Zoom. So this really requires creating some novel stimulus. Like get novel stimulus up there. Have catchy, sticky stories. Get people up and moving and doing. Get people practicing. What I've been doing sometimes in my group when it looks low is I always have like, what are things we're going to practice today in group? What are the things not only I want them to understand, but I want to get them to actually do. And I'll tell them, okay, I'm going to set the timer for 4 minutes or 3 minutes. I want you to get up, go to the area of the house that you need to use this skill the most. Take your book with you, and I want you to visually walk through it or do it, and then come back. And then I can go through, where did people go? What did they do? Perfect, show it us again. And I've gotten people up and moving. And I try to shift, I haven't done it today, I'm sorry. But in group, I try to shift their attention every 20 minutes and try to get them up and doing something. Sometimes this includes doing mindfulness later. So every group we start off usually with mindfulness. And the function of that in skills group is to get people to get a sampling of different ways to practice mindfulness. I talk about it as this is like trying on shoes. You're going to come to group, you're going to try on a new pair of shoes every week, and then you walk around in it, try it out for a few minutes, and then you figure out which shoes fit you and which ones you want to have in your wardrobe. So we're going to try out 26 different or 52 different mindfulness exercises over this course of this treatment. And you're going to try them on and hopefully find 6 to 10 of them to have in your closet. Now, we do that every group. It is not required to do it at the beginning of every group. So for some of my groups, I actually might do that somewhere in the last third of the group where their intention is waning. They might feel distressed and bored. A, because it helps create a novel stimulus, shifts their attention around. And I guess now 3, I've switched numbers now. It actually gets them to practice the skill in the internal context they need to use the skill. When my attention is shifting, when I'm having judgments, when this is starting to become distressing, now I'm able to practice this skill. To watch and notice this, to strengthen my ability to put my attention on something else. It's wonderful when people have glasses, because then I can often tell what else they're looking on at their screen. I have glasses, so I have to be careful. I don't know if anybody's seen this so far, and when you work with the clients that you actually see the YouTube video, it's like I literally see baby cats. I see cat videos like shining through your glasses. Is actually addressing people who are distracted and bring them back. And just modeling it, as matter-of-factly dealing with it and bringing them in. Adolescents, some of my adolescents recently have started off group distracted. It's like, I'm totally fine if you're in your room doing group. I'm totally fine if you want to sit on your bed because it's comfortable and take notes from group. As soon as those covers start coming up, no, stop this, get up, move around. We are not doing group from bed. So really hitting that first, because I seen in one group we had kids were laying in bed, and then all of a sudden, like within a week, they're all in bed. It's like, no, up. I have never had anyone go to bed in live person group. Nobody crawled up in bed. I used to have people put the head on the table, but I did not have to contend with people getting in bed like I do now. The other big problem, when you need to have a one-on-one conversation in a public setting. So this is really getting good, both lead and co-lead, of how to be able to have these talks or bring things in. One, I want to tell people, make sure, I'm going to move my camera, just I'm looking away from y'all. Be able to orient the clients how to ask for questions. Like if you need help, how to ask for a question. Ultimately, I absolutely want people to practice raising their hand, bringing it up. Dan, I have a question. Can you help me? But I also want people to be able to ask the co-lead. I need some help. I need some help because I don't know what's going on. I need some help because I'm misunderstanding this, and is he calling me a jerk? I need some help practicing skills because I'm feeling dysregulated because something Billy said. ... I really want to get people practicing asking for help to reduce the shame that they might experience, the unjustified shame of asking for help. In group, in person, the co-lead is often seeing people who need help and moving in. The lead sees people who need help and are jumping in. On video, when you have a bunch of different screens, it's hard to see the nonverbals to notice who needs help. So you really want to orient clients ahead of time. I want you to ask for help. This is why it's important. This is how it ties into their life worth living goals and relevant things in their life. I want you to practice doing this. The co-lead doing private chats. So make sure you practice this ahead of time. So you know it's a private chat and not a public chat. The worst is thinking it's a private chat and it's a public chat. Having the co-lead be able to call people. Orient them ahead of time. If you step out of the room off Zoom, it's just like if you're stepping out of the room in group. I'm probably going to check in, see how it's going, text you, coach you, and I want to come back to group and assume you are as well. I also want to make sure, same thing when we think of like phone coaching principles, that I want to make sure that I'm actually doing a frequent contact with clients in group. I'm not just interacting with them because there's a crisis or a problem, but I'm actually doing this frequently and getting the co-lead to do this frequently. Oh, it's always a problem when clients get dysregulated in group. Everyone's had that group. No one likes that group, but it happens in group. So what happens in here? We hit a little bit of this, is to make sure you guys can practice muting people, minimize people if they need to be out of group, and really getting the co-lead to do the crisis coaching on the phone, not in the video chat, but on the phone. And then step back in. If there's a big disruption and somebody's dysregulated in group, the leader wants to be able to validate the client's experience of the emotions they might have who are still on this, recognize, yep, there was a big disruption, and be able to talk about it in a validating way, and then quickly pull for skills that clients need to be using right now and jump back to content. So it's no different than it is in person. The biggest thing you got to do is make sure how to be able to minimize the disruption if the client doesn't minimize itself. 8 times out of 10, the client will actually turn off their camera and jump out of the call. That's when the co-lead needs to move in to check in, pull for more skillful responses, and then come back in. Between groups. Now, this has been interesting. These are things I've actually done before in person, assumed that when we go on video, it was going to be harder for people to learn things, and then did a bunch of teaching, did a bunch of resources, and actually thinking this is going better in video than it was in person on this area. And I'm actually going to go back to person. I'm going to keep doing this. So one is that when people missed group in our clinic, they had to come in and watch their group. So we videotaped all of our groups. And let's say Stephen missed group because he's on vacation. He might come in either before group or before his individual session or after his individual session and watch his group. So this has been a thing now on video. I can't, and everyone at home, people can't watch their group because I can't guarantee confidentiality. So I had to do a lot of teaching. So luckily in February, in January, I started teaching graduates or postdocs and some of our trainees and other people we were going through skills and I was teaching them skills, and we videotaped me teaching them skills, which shockingly looks just like me teaching client skills. It's a one-trick pony. And then since we've been on a lockdown, one of my fun weekend activities is sit there to look at the corner of my office and teach skills like I'm teaching people skills, and create a video library on Dropbox. So when people miss their skills group, we can send them a link and they can watch the teaching, they can get the material. And it doesn't have client confidential information on it. And this has been really helpful, especially for our clients that maybe couldn't come into the clinic more than once a week in the future, that we're going to use. But actually, some of our families have actually started watching these videos. They went to group and they're watching the video because it's helping them come in contact with skills more than once a week. You know, I come to a group, I come in contact with skills, and then I don't think about it until the night before skills. I ram and do my homework, and then I come in contact the next week. I don't acquire things. So this has been a way for some of our families to come in contact multiple times a week with skills. So that's actually been helpful. The other thing is that same sort of stuff is we wanted clients to come in contact with skills more frequently and do their homework. So we had the co-leads and the leads actually do the worksheets themselves as well. And then send out somewhere 3 or 4 days after skills group, send your homework to the clients. So here's how I did my homework. A, to model doing this. B, to reinforce the idea that these are important things to do in practice. And just to cue skills, because they're sitting at home and a lot of things just become cues for not much. So getting them to just get skills to enter their life. And this was generated out of people having low skills completion. So instead of lecturing to people why this is important, we wanted to model what we wanted them to do. And we want to model effective problem solving. We want to model this is ways to get homework done, which was really important when we're in our multifamily groups. Because one of those things is I'm really trying to model for parents effective problem solving as much as the kids. Supplemental videos and other things have been helpful as well. Just getting like 3-4 minute video clips off the internet. I just taught in my multifamily skills group a couple of weeks ago, reinforcement. And there are some great websites around reinforcement for parents that were really good supplemental aids. I figure if people are watching and doing this much internet, they should have some at least helpful things to do in front of that internet. So hopefully their kids are looking at these things too. Let's see, Stephen, when I shared one of my things, I lost my chat function. Is there any questions so far that I've missed?
You are clear on questions at this point. We have about 15 minutes left. And you may have alluded to this. I was kind of curious as you were talking about that. Have you had anybody record themselves and present it as part of the group?
Oh yeah.
Skills?
Yes, I actually have people did challenges with people to videotape with their phone, make a skills video of them practicing skills. Yep. This probably originated off some off-the-wall comment I made about me threatening them to make TikTok videos of me dancing, or a TikTok for skills. And actually that got kids to actually, oh, that would be a good idea. But it wasn't TikTok. Yeah, so you can get people to, get them to do. The ultimate thing in skills group and therapy, how do we get people doing skills, not talking about skills? And you bring up another point that you didn't directly bring up, Stephen, I do think is important. When you do if you set up on Zoom or whatever platform, make sure you disable the client's abilities to record the actual session. Because if you do Zoom, you could record it. I don't know if it's a default or one of the settings in there. You can make it that only the host can actually record stuff, because you don't want people recording group and having that up on the cloud or anywhere.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Oh, sure. Thanks, Stephen. So phone coaching, okay, it's the phone, right? So maybe that doesn't really change much. But since we just reshuffle and have like radically changed how we deliver each mode of treatment, it's helpful to always go back to what's the function these modes are trying to satisfy. And the function of phone coaching is generalization, is to get new behavior patterns established in relevant context in clients' lives. Getting things they're learning in group and in sessions to be taking root in their life. And that often phone coaching can get truncated down to just crisis calls. And that actually isn't meeting the function. There's a lot of bandwidth and other things that need to be in there. So this has been a helpful time for us to really re-examine what are we doing for phone and how are we generalizing skills, and getting people to really kind of look at what are ways that we can generalize stuff and not just be on crisis calls. Because I actually don't want crisis. I mean, I do want crisis calls, but I really want 80% of my contact with clients outside of session to be about strengthening, generalizing, and non-crisis oriented prompts. I want them to actually get the fire out and get the kindling away from the fire and the gas, not just go in there with a fire extinguisher on a forest fire. Forest fire metaphors are very relevant in Washington. They might not be something relevant. Do you guys have forest fires? Is that a thing? Oh, good. Well, I don't know if that's a good thing.
We have swamp fires. We don't have forest fires.
Oh, swamp fires. I'd be lost on a swamp fire. And then the other ones that did change was consultation team. You know, that part, you know, we still have team and we meet weekly, but there's a lot that's missed. I think DBT is a team-based treatment. It requires a team of delivering a treatment and have a shared responsibility for shared clients. And so it really is, it's like, what are the things that you notice start dropping off by just doing Zoom team meetings? And, you know, some of the things that we notice is that our team just saw each other every day. We talk to each other a lot. We talk about clients all the time. We're always engaging with each other. We're doing little book clubs and all sorts of stuff. There was just a high frequency of interaction, of consultation, of supporting and building up that foundation of agreements we all have, and focus on being adherent with the treatment. And that just an hour, yes, we did team for an hour, but we functioned as a team throughout the week. Is that some people we've had to actually make team a little longer to be able to fill the bucket up. Other times we've actually just had to have like active team hours, like open door. Like these are the times, like each team member said, these are the times I'm around, and just either on Microsoft Teams or on Zoom, just did a informal consult with people, or just did check-ins. Because the other big part, therapists get reinforced for social interaction. That's why therapists become therapists and not like accountants. So when we have significant drops in reinforcement rates, we become irritable, depressed, and a little more stagnant. So we really had to look at ways, how do we, as a team, increase social reinforcement? And what were the contexts? What do therapists find not only socially reinforcing, but intellectually reinforcing, talking about therapy. I don't know about you all, but when I sit there and start talking about studies and therapies and at home, I shockingly don't get reinforced. I think that behavior has been sufficiently punished out of me. Like, I need other therapists to sit there and talk about, like, I can't even go around the world and start going like social reinforcement rates. Like, where else in the world can you go and say social reinforcement rates and not literally get kicked out of the boat? I can't do that out fishing, but I need other therapists to be able to talk about these things. So in order for me to be an effective therapist, I actually have to have my reinforcement rates up and monitor them and have a baseline. Shifting out of the office dropped my baseline of reinforcement rates. And so I actually have to rely on the team. We need a mechanism and structure to up the reinforcement rates. And really thinking about what's the whole goal of consultation team. The goal of consultation team is to increase adherence in delivering DBT across the modes to each of our clients. So what gets in the way of us delivering this treatment adherently is all fodder for consultation team. So as we're doing video therapy, anything that gets in the way of doing this treatment is open for consultation team. And I need my team is committed already to help me solve those things. So we tend to just have more things we might need help solving each other, helping each other solve. And so that's also one to be thinking about, looking at the needs of team and making sure you have enough time to adequately address the needs in order to reach the goal. The goal being doing this treatment adherently. What's the needs in the team in order to do that? How do I structure team to do that? And this sometimes bumps into agency barriers. A lot of times team doesn't get enough time, or you don't get compensated time for doing it. It could be, ways to problem solve that is think about maybe temporarily, maybe not doing a longer team, but maybe doing team twice a week until your baseline and problems start coming down. All right. So always try to boil things down to 3 points. That's one thing I learned from Dr. Linehan, is boil things down to 3 points. That's actually got the skills manual. So really thinking about staying dialectically in this, like think things thoroughly ahead of time and be flexible and jump in, right? Fear will get us to overplan. There's also an urgency of the clients who need this treatment now, and this is their treatment, and that they're not going to be doing treatment some other time. And so how to hold both this up to give them a quality treatment and address the treatment they need right now. I also really get a lot of input from clients on this. I often tell clients that I am here actually in service of their goal. Treatment is in service of their goals. My goal for treatment is that we no longer have you in treatment, because my job is to help you be out of treatment. So I really want to get the input from them. How's this working? What could be more effective in this? What works, what doesn't? What ideas do they have? I've actually got some really good ideas from my clients. The other big one is really gathering data. Like, this is an interesting thing when you look at the data, and there is no studies on doing DBT versus being on video therapy. There's some data on video delivered therapy for prolonged exposure and some anxiety and depression work, but not on DBT. So I think it's really good. We're forced into this. We got to do it. And we really should be gathering data. So in our clinic, we are gathering all of the baseline data we did before and midterm data of, history of suicide attempts, self-harm, hospitalization, DER scores, PHQ-9 scores, and other individual measures to really be looking at this. Is this effective? Or at least not worse. Because when we think about availability and accessibility of treatments, this might be inconvenient for therapists and clients, but it actually can make this treatment, as well as other treatments, way more accessible. for clients to be able to actually be able to be in groups and be able to individual sessions without being able to commute, without being able to take time off work and other things. So really, I really encourage people, as you do this, collect data. And what's actually look at the effectiveness of it. And just, that doesn't mean therapists have to do this in the future. I keep telling my therapist, we're going to do a really good job now, and we're going to be working really hard on this. That doesn't mean you have to do this. If it's effective, it doesn't mean you have to do it. Just like other treatments, you don't have to do every treatment. You got to see what's a good fit for you too. So I'll make sure I share these slides with Lindsay and Stephen if people want a copy. I think that was one of the things that people had. But other than that, I really want to be able to send some time if there's any questions. And also really thank you all for being part of this.
Thank you, Dan. I did have one quick question, just anything anybody else might have. Just in terms of treatment interfering behavior, anything specific to the telehealth environment that people should just pay attention to?
Yeah, I think probably, you know, probably the biggest treatment interfering behavior is the clients not wanting to be on video. And how does that become treatment interfering? I don't know about you all, but if you're talking just individually to someone and you can't see them, it's hard to maintain a conversation. So I've really had to address that with clients. And actually, you know, on your little thumbnail sketch, you can they can turn on their video, but they can turn off the thumbnail sketch that they see. So if it is them seeing themselves, and that's usually what it is, them seeing their own faces on video, they can turn that off, but you then can see them.
Interesting. Thank you.
The other biggest treatment interfering behavior is getting people to know which day it is. And for some of my adolescent clients who had somewhere before a 1 p.m. session is making sure they're up. So if you've treated adolescents, this for me, it's kind of been like summer. You know, it's the same thing every summer. You're just doing summer in March.
That makes a lot of sense. I thought you were talking about reminding myself what day it was, but I get it. Yes.
I just show up in front of this computer every day, and then I try to figure out which day it is once I see people.
It's a good point. Anybody else as we roll into the final minutes, questions? I see Lindsay is posting the participation about the C certificates is in the chat. The PDF of the slides will be available and emailed. The rest of the message says, make sure you check out our website and other upcoming telehealth specific training opportunities. And she has a link to the website in there. Well, Dan, I can't thank you enough. I really appreciate it. This was a very short turnaround, talking about adjusting on the fly and being flexible. I think Dan and I we officially met all of about 3 weeks ago via email, and to turn that conversation around to a presentation that we could get out to Louisiana. I thank you very much, and I really appreciate all of y'all participating. Particularly since we haven't done anything with DBT yet, and it is an important strategy for the state. I know the interest is growing, so expect to hear much more from us about DBT in the future.
Great. No, thank you all. I really appreciate it. It helps always organize things. And hey, if people have ideas or feedback, you know, this is always an evolving thing. We always want to get better and collaborate on this thing. So feel free to shoot me an email. I have my contact in here as well. Ideas, feedback, things that worked, didn't work, things you all learned, would be great.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. And we'll be in touch soon.